The abandoned child. The crystalline spires of Zavoria glittered in the light of three setting suns, their iridescent surfaces refracting a kaleidoscope of colors across the planet's capital city. Within the towering central birthing facility, a cacophony of chirps and trills filled the air as newly hatched Zavorian infants emerged from their incubation chambers. Amidst the joyous celebration, lead geneticist Sorlana's antennae twitched with growing concern. Her compound eyes fixed on the readouts scrolling across her holoscreen, each new data point confirming her worst fears. "This can't be," she muttered, mandibles clicking nervously. "Run the analysis again." Her assistant, Cree, hesitated before speaking. "Lead geneticist, we've already run it 5 times. The results are conclusive." Sorlana's exoskeleton seemed to pale as she approached the incubation chamber. Inside, a tiny Zavorian infant lay curled up, looking for all the world like any other newborn of their species. But Sorlana knew the truth that lay hidden beneath its chitinous shell. "Prepare for emergency extraction," she commanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "And alert the High Council. We have a defective." The word sent ripples of shock through the birthing chamber. Other geneticists and caretakers froze, their own tasks forgotten as they turned to stare at the ill-fated infant. In Zavorian society, genetic perfection wasn't just an ideal. It was the foundation upon which their entire civilization was built. A defective threatened everything they held sacred. Within the hour, the High Council had convened. 7 of Zavoria's most esteemed leaders gathered in a private chamber, their faces grim as Sorlana presented her findings. "The infant possesses a rare genetic mutation," she explained, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "It will never develop the telepathic abilities that are the cornerstone of our society. Furthermore, its exoskeleton is fragile. It will require constant care and protection." High Counselor Zix, the eldest of the group, leaned forward. "What are our options?" Sorlana's antennae drooped. "Given the severity of the defects, our laws are clear. The infant must be discarded." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. It was Counselor Neem, known for her progressive views, who finally spoke up. "Surely there must be another way. Perhaps off-world adoption." "And risk our reputation," Counselor Vex interrupted. "If word got out that we produced a defective, it could jeopardize centuries of carefully cultivated genetic traits. No, the law exists for a reason. We must protect the greater good." In the end, the vote was unanimous. The infant would be abandoned on a nearby moon, left to the mercy of the cosmos. It was a harsh sentence, but one the Zavorians believed necessary to maintain the purity of their species. As Sorlana prepared the infant for its final journey, she allowed herself a moment of weakness. Her chelicera gently stroked the child's soft exoskeleton. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered. "May you find peace among the stars." Halfway across the galaxy, on a grimy space station orbiting the gas giant Nix-9, Dant Russo nursed a drink at the dingy bar of the rusty airlock. His scared knuckles wrapped around the glass of neon blue liquor, dark eyes scanning the crowd for potential marks or threats. An old habit from his days as a low-level enforcer for the Orion Syndicate. Those days were behind him now. Or so he kept telling himself. Truth was, going straight was harder than he'd anticipated. Legitimate work was scarce for an ex-con with a rap sheet as long as his arm, especially out here on the fringes of civilized space. A commotion near the docking bays caught Dunt's attention. He watched as a sleek Zavorian shuttle departed, its crystalline hull glinting in the harsh station lights. Curious, he tossed back the rest of his drink and made his way towards the source of the disturbance. As he rounded the corner, Dunt's eyes widened in disbelief. There, nestled in a pile of discarded cargo netting, lay a tiny alien infant. Its iridescent exoskeleton gleamed softly in the dim light, small limbs twitching feebly. "What the hell?" Dante muttered, crouching down for a closer look. He'd seen Zavorian young before, pampered offspring of wealthy merchants and diplomats. But this was different. The infant's shell seemed too soft, almost translucent in places, and there was something off about the way it moved, uncoordinated and weak. A nearby dock worker noticed Dant's interest. "Damn bugs dumped it here," the man spat. "Said it was defective, or some shit. Guess even the high and mighty Zavorians produce duds sometimes, eh?" Dante felt a surge of anger. He'd seen some cold-hearted things in his time with the Syndicate, but abandoning a helpless infant, that was a new low. Without fully understanding why, he scooped up the tiny alien, cradling it awkwardly against his chest. "Hey, what are you doing?" the dock worker asked, alarm creeping into his voice. "You can't just take it. The station authorities." "Will what?" Dante growled, fixing the man with a hard stare. "Come looking for an alien baby that officially doesn't exist. One that was dumped here like garbage." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You didn't see anything." "Got it." The dock worker swallowed hard and nodded, backing away quickly. Dant turned his attention back to the infant in his arms. Its large, compound eyes seemed to study him with an unsettling intelligence. "All right, little guy," Dant murmured. "I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I can't just leave you here. Let's get you somewhere safe, and then, well, we'll figure it out from there." As Dante made his way back to his small, battered ship, his mind raced. He had no idea how to care for a Zavorian infant, let alone one with special needs. He was barely scraping by as it was. Taking on this responsibility could attract unwanted attention from both alien authorities and his old criminal contacts. But as the infant chirped softly and nestled closer to his chest, Dante felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose. Maybe this was his chance at redemption, a way to prove that even a washed-up ex-con could do some good in the universe. "Looks like we're in this together now, kid," Dante said as he sealed the airlock of his ship. He settled into the pilot's seat, the infant secure in a makeshift sling across his chest. "I can't promise it'll be easy, but I swear I'll do my best by you. That's more than those bastards who left you ever did." With a deep breath, Dant fired up the engines. As his ship pulled away from the station, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. For better or worse, only time would tell. The stars stretched into lines of light as the ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying Dante and his unexpected ward towards an uncertain future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, one thing was clear. This unlikely pair was about to embark on an adventure that would challenge the preconceptions of humans and aliens alike. An unlikely family. The rickety freighter Star Scrapper drifted through the asteroid field on the outskirts of the Rigel system, its hull pockmarked with micro-impacts and hastily patched breaches. Inside the cramped living quarters, Dant Rousseau paced back and forth, cradling the Zavorian infant against his chest. "Come on, kid," he muttered, desperation creeping into his voice. "You gotta eat something." It had been 3 standard weeks since Dant had rescued the abandoned alien child from that seedy space station. 3 weeks of trial and error, sleepless nights, and more than a few close calls. The infant, whom Dant had taken to calling Spark, due to the faint bioluminescence that pulsed beneath its fragile exoskeleton, was unlike any life form he'd encountered before. Spark chirped weakly, its compound eyes flickering with fatigue. Dant had cobbled together a nutrient solution based on what little information he could find about Zavorian physiology, but it was clear the child wasn't thriving. Its exoskeleton remained alarmingly soft, and it lacked the coordination typical of its species at this stage of development. A sudden beeping from the cockpit interrupted Dant's worried musings. He secured Spark in the makeshift nest he'd constructed from old pressure suit padding and hurried to check the alert. Ah, shit, Dant swore as he saw the readout. An Orion Syndicate vessel was on an intercept course, no doubt drawn by the bounty his former employers had placed on his head. He'd managed to stay off their radar for months, but caring for Spark had forced him to take risks, to seek out supplies and information in places where he might be recognized. Dant's fingers flew over the navigation controls, plotting a new course that would take them deeper into the treacherous asteroid field. It was a dangerous gambit, but he hoped the Syndicate ship wouldn't risk following them into such hazardous territory. As the star scrapper dove between massive chunks of space rock, Dante felt a pang of guilt. This was no life for a child, constantly on the run, living hand-to-mouth in the shadows of civilized space. But what choice did he have? He couldn't abandon Spark the way its own people had, and turning the child over to the authorities would likely mean a fate worse than death in some alien laboratory. The ship shuddered as a piece of debris glanced off the hull. In the nest behind him, Spark let out a frightened trill. Dante gritted his teeth, pushing the engines to their limit as he wove through the asteroid field. "Hold on, kid," he called over his shoulder. "We're almost through." After what felt like an eternity, the star scrapper emerged on the other side of the field. The Syndicate ship was nowhere to be seen on the scanners. Dante let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and set a course for the nearest habitable system. As the adrenaline of the chase faded, exhaustion settled over Dante like a heavy blanket. He stumbled back to check on Spark, relief washing over him as he saw the infant was unharmed. But that relief was short-lived as he noticed how listless Spark had become. "We need help," Dante admitted to himself. "Real help." He pulled up the star charts, searching for a sanctuary where he and Spark might find refuge. His eyes fell on a small notation at the edge of the map. Novalis, a remote colony known for its policy of neutrality and its acceptance of outcasts from across the galaxy. It was a long shot, but at this point, Dante was running out of options. He set the coordinates for Novalis and engaged the hyperdrive, praying that he wasn't making a terrible mistake. The star scrapper touched down on the outskirts of New Hope, Novalis's largest settlement, as the planet's binary suns were setting. Dante emerged cautiously, Spark securely wrapped against his chest. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar vegetation, and in the distance, he could hear the calls of alien wildlife. As Dante made his way towards the settlement, he became aware of eyes watching him from the shadows. New Hope was a patchwork of architectural styles, reflecting the diverse origins of its inhabitants. Beings of all shapes and sizes regarded the newcomer with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "You look lost, stranger," a gravelly voice called out. Dante turned to see a hunched figure emerge from a nearby alleyway. The alien was vaguely humanoid, with mottled green skin and bulbous eyes that seemed to move independently of each other. "I'm looking for help," Dante replied cautiously. "Medical help. For the little one." The alien's eyes swiveled to focus on Spark. "Interesting," it muttered. "Very interesting. Follow me. I know someone who might be able to assist you." Dante hesitated, years of street smarts screaming at him not to trust this strange creature. But a weak chirp from Spark steeled his resolve. He nodded and fell into step behind his unexpected guide. They wound their way through the labyrinthine streets of New Hope, eventually arriving at a squat building adorned with an eclectic array of medical symbols from a dozen different cultures. A sign in multiple languages proclaimed it to be Dr. Zora's Xenobiological Clinic. The green-skinned alien rapped on the door with a gnarled knuckle. After a moment, it swung open to reveal a tall, willowy being with silvery skin and elongated fingers. 4 dark eyes blinked in surprise at the visitors. Grok, the being, presumably Dr. Zora, addressed Dante's guide. "What have you brought me this time?" Grok gestured towards Dante and Spark. "New arrivals. The little one needs help." Dr. Zora's eyes narrowed as they took in the unlikely pair, a human and a Zavorian infant. Now that's not something you see every day. "Come in, quickly." Dante followed Dr. Zora into a cluttered examination room, his nerves on edge. He'd avoided doctors and clinics since rescuing Spark, fearing what might happen if the wrong people learned of the child's existence. But he was out of options now. "Let me see the child," Dr. Zora said, holding out her arms. Dante hesitated, then carefully transferred Spark to the doctor's care. Dr. Zara's extra set of eyes glowed softly as she ran a series of scans over Spark's tiny form. Her expression grew increasingly grave as she worked. "This infant has a rare genetic condition," she finally announced. "One that would be challenging to treat even with access to Zavorian medical technology. I'm amazed it has survived this long." Dot's heart sank. "Can you help?" Dr. Zara was silent for a long moment, her fingers gently stroking Spark's fragile exoskeleton. "It won't be easy," she said at last, "and it will require resources that don't come cheap. But yes, I believe I can help stabilize the child's condition." Relief flooded through Dante, followed quickly by anxiety. I don't have much in the way of credits," he admitted. Dr. Zara fixed him with all four of her eyes. "Then you'll work to pay off your debt. This clinic always needs an extra pair of hands, and I suspect you have skills that could be useful in other ways as well." Dante nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "Thank you," he managed to say. "I'll do whatever it takes." As Dr. Zara began preparing a nutrient infusion for Spark, Dante found himself marveling at the turn his life had taken. Here he was, an ex-criminal on the run, preparing to work in a clinic to save the life of an alien child he'd known for less than a month. It was madness. But as he watched Spark's bioluminescence pulse a little stronger under Dr. Zara's care, Dante knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Spark would face them together. An unlikely family forged in the crucible of adversity and compassion. Little did Dante know that his decision to seek help on Novalis would set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy and challenge the very foundations of Zavorian society. The adventure was only just beginning. Hidden talents. 5 years had passed since Dante and Spark had found sanctuary on Novalis. The Star Scrapper sat mothballed on the outskirts of New Hope, a silent reminder of their former life on the run. Dante had settled into his new role at Dr. Zara's clinic, his street smarts and mechanical skills proving invaluable in keeping the eclectic assortment of medical equipment functioning. Spark, against all odds, had not only survived but thrived under Dr. Zara's care. Though still small for a Zavorian of his age, his exoskeleton had hardened into a swirling pattern of blues and greens. His compound eyes, once dull and unfocused, now sparkled with intelligence and curiosity. On this particular morning, Dante found Spark in the clinic's small garden, crouched over a patch of bioluminescent fungi. The child's antennae twitched with excitement as he carefully examined the glowing spores. "Hey, kiddo," Dante called out. "What have you got there?" Spark turned, his mandibles clicking in what Dante had learned was the Zavorian equivalent of a smile. "Papa, look what I discovered." He held up a handful of the fungi, which pulsed with an otherworldly light. "I think I can use these to enhance Dr. Zara's tissue regenerator." Dante chuckled, ruffling the soft bristles atop Spark's head. "Always the little scientist, aren't you? Come on, let's get some breakfast before you start revolutionizing medical technology." As they made their way back inside, Dante marveled at how far they'd come. Spark's physical disabilities were still apparent. He would never possess the telepathic abilities of his species, and his exoskeleton required regular treatments to maintain its integrity. But what he lacked in traditional Zavorian strengths, he more than made up for with his brilliant mind and insatiable curiosity. Dr. Zara was already in the clinic's small kitchen, her elongated fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of something that smelled vaguely of cinnamon. "Good morning, you two," she greeted them. "Spark, I hope you're ready for today's lesson. We'll be covering advanced xenobiology." Spark chittered excitedly, but before he could respond, a commotion outside caught their attention. Dante moved to the window, his old instincts kicking in as he assessed the situation. A crowd had gathered in the street, surrounding a group of newcomers. Dante's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the crystalline armor and elegant weaponry of Zavorian peacekeepers. "Papa?" Spark asked, sensing the sudden tension. "What's wrong?" Dante exchanged a worried glance with Dr. Zara. They had known this day might come, but they had hoped for more time. Spark, Dant said, crouching down to meet the child's compound eyes. Remember how we talked about keeping your talents a secret? About being careful who knows about your special abilities? Spark's antennae drooped slightly. Because some people might want to use me for bad things. Dant nodded. That's right. Well, there are some visitors in town who we need to be extra careful around. I need you to stay here with Dr. Zara while I go see what's happening. Okay. As Dant stepped out into the street, he could hear snippets of conversation from the gathered crowd. The Zavorian peacekeepers were asking questions, showing holographic images of a child that bore a striking resemblance to Spark. One of the peacekeepers, a tall female with iridescent purple armor, noticed Dant's approach. "You there, human," she called out. "We seek information about a missing Zavorian child. Have you seen any of your kind in the company of a young one of our species?" Dant forced himself to remain calm, drawing on years of experience, bluffing his way out of tight spots. "Can't say that I have," he replied evenly. "Not many Zavorians make their way out to Novalis. What's so special about this kid?" The peacekeeper's antennae twitched with what might have been annoyance. "That is classified information. If you have nothing to report, move along." As Dant turned to leave, he caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Grok, the alien who had first led him to Dr. Zora's clinic. The green-skinned being made a subtle gesture, indicating Dant should follow. Once they were safely out of earshot of the Zavorian peacekeepers, Grok spoke in a low, urgent tone. "They're not just looking for any child," he said. "Word is, this kid's got some kind of unique genetic quirk, something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy if it falls into the wrong hands." Dant's mind raced. Could Spark's brilliant intellect and affinity for technology be more than just compensation for his physical limitations? "Thanks for the heads up," he muttered to Grok. "I owe you one." As Dant hurried back to the clinic, he realized that their peaceful life on Novalis was coming to an end. They needed to leave, and soon. But where could they go that would be safe from both the Zavorian authorities and whoever else might be hunting for Spark? He burst into the clinic, startling Dr. Zara and Spark, who were huddled over a complex diagram of alien cellular structures. "We need to go," Dant said breathlessly. "Now." Dr. Zara's extra set of eyes blinked rapidly. "I feared this day would come," she said softly. "Spark's abilities, they're beyond anything I've seen in my centuries of xenobiological study. If the wrong people were to learn of them." Spark looked between Dante and Dr. Zara, his compound eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Papa, what's happening?" Dant knelt down, placing a gentle hand on Spark's shoulder. "Remember those stories I used to tell you? About the adventures we had before we came to Novalis? Well, it's time for a new adventure. But I promise you, no matter what happens, we'll face it together." As they hurriedly packed what few possessions they couldn't bear to leave behind, Dante's mind whirled with possibilities. They needed allies, resources, and most importantly, a plan. The galaxy was vast, but where could they find a place that would accept them and protect Spark's incredible potential? An idea began to form in Dante's mind. It was risky, perhaps even foolhardy, but it might be their only chance. He remembered whispers he'd heard during his days with the Orion Syndicate, tales of a hidden enclave of scientific minds who operated beyond the reach of galactic law. "The Nexus," Dante murmured to himself. Dr. Zora looked up sharply at the name. "You can't be serious," she said. "The Nexus is a myth, a fairy tale told by outlaw scientists and renegade engineers." Dante's eyes gleamed with determination. "Maybe. But right now, a myth might be our best shot at keeping Spark safe and giving him a chance to reach his full potential." As they slipped out the back of the clinic and made their way towards the Star Scrapper, Dante couldn't shake the feeling that they were embarking on something far bigger than just running from the law. Spark's unique abilities could reshape the future of multiple species, challenge long-held beliefs about genetic perfection, and perhaps even bridge the gap between humans and aliens in ways no one had ever imagined. The old freighter's engines roared to life, shaking off years of disuse. As they lifted off from Novalis, leaving behind the only home Spark had ever known, Dante made a silent vow. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he would protect this child, his child, and ensure that Spark's incredible gifts were used to make the galaxy a better place for all species. Little did they know that their quest to find the mythical nexus would set in motion a series of events that would shake the foundations of galactic society and force both humans and aliens to confront their deepest prejudices and fears. Galactic confrontation. The star scrapper drifted silently through the swirling gases of the Cerulean Nebula, its systems powered down to avoid detection. Inside the cramped cockpit, Dante pored over star charts and encrypted data packets, searching for any clue that might lead them to the fabled nexus. Spark, now on the cusp of adolescence by Zavorian standards, sat cross-legged on the floor, tinkering with a piece of salvage technology. His exoskeleton gleamed with a soft, pulsating light, a side effect of Dr. Zora's treatments that had unexpectedly enhanced his natural bioluminescence. "Any luck, Papa?" Spark asked, his mandibles clicking softly. Dante sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Nothing solid yet, kiddo. But we'll find it. We have to." It had been 3 years since they'd fled Novalis, always one step ahead of their pursuers. The Zavorian authorities had intensified their search, and rumors of Spark's unique abilities had spread through the criminal underworld, attracting the attention of various factions eager to exploit his potential. A sudden alert from the ship's sensors jolted Dante from his thoughts. "Proximity warning," he muttered, fingers flying over the controls. "Looks like we've got company." Through the view screen, a sleek Zavorian cruiser materialized from the nebula's swirling clouds. Its crystalline hull glittered ominously, weapons ports sliding open. "Unidentified vessel," a voice crackled over the comm system. "This is Peacekeeper Kshala of the Zavorian Interstellar Fleet. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Dante's mind raced. They were outgunned and had nowhere to run. He turned to Spark, seeing the fear in those compound eyes he'd grown to love as his own. "Remember the plan?" he asked softly. Spark nodded, antennae quivering. "I remember, Papa, but I'm scared." Dante pulled the young Zavorian into a tight embrace. "I know, kiddo, but you're the bravest, smartest being I've ever met. We'll get through this together." As the Zavorian cruiser locked onto the star scrapper with a tractor beam, Dante activated a series of hidden modifications he'd made to the ship. Spark retreated to a concealed compartment, while Dante prepared to face their pursuers. The airlock hissed open, and a squad of Zavorian peacekeepers stormed aboard, led by a tall, imposing figure Dante recognized as Kshala. Her iridescent armor seemed to absorb the dim light of the ship, and her compound eyes fixed on Dante with cold intensity. "Where is the child?" Kshala demanded, her voice carrying the harmonics of barely contained fury. Dante raised his hand slowly. "What child? I'm just a simple trader trying to make my way through the nebula." Ksala's antennae twitched in irritation. "Do not play games with me, human. We know you have been harboring a Zavorian fugitive, a defective that should have been eliminated years ago." Dante felt a surge of anger at her words, but forced himself to remain calm. "Look around all you want. There's no one here but me." As the peacekeepers began to search the ship, Dante silently prayed that Spark would remain hidden and that the plan they'd formulated would work. Everything hinged on the next few moments. Suddenly, the ship's systems sprang to life, consoles flickering with strange alien code. The peacekeepers stumbled as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Kshala spun towards Dante, her weapon raised. "What trickery is this?" Before Dante could respond, a holographic image flickered to life in the center of the room. It showed a Zavorian child, unmistakably Spark, but with his features subtly altered. "Greetings, Peacekeeper Kshala." The hologram spoke, its voice a perfect mimicry of Zavorian speech patterns. "I am the one you seek, but I am not what you believe me to be." Shala's compound eyes widened in shock. Impossible, she breathed. A defective could never. The hologram continued, its words carefully chosen to sow doubt and confusion. I am not a threat to our people, but a promise of a new future. My unique genetic structure has given me abilities beyond what any of us thought possible. I can interface with technology in ways that could revolutionize our society. As if to demonstrate, the hologram gestured, and the ship's systems responded, displays showing complex calculations and simulations that even Dant couldn't fully comprehend. The human you see before you, the hologram of Spark continued, nodding towards Dante, has protected me, nurtured me, and shown me that our definition of perfection is flawed. There is strength in diversity, in embracing what makes us different. Shala's weapon lowered slightly, uncertainty creeping into her posture. If what you say is true, it changes everything. Dant saw his opening. Your people cast him aside because he was different, he said softly. But look at what he's become. Imagine what he could do if given the chance to reach his full potential. For a long moment, tension crackled in the air. Then, slowly, Shala lowered her weapon completely. I need to report this to the High Council, she said, her voice wavering. This goes beyond my authority. As the peacekeepers withdrew, visibly shaken by what they had witnessed, Dant allowed himself a small smile. The gambit had worked. For now. The holographic deception, combined with Spark's genuine ability to interface with the ship's systems, had bought them time and sowed the seeds of doubt among their pursuers. Once they were alone, Spark emerged from his hiding place, trembling slightly. Did it work, Papa? He asked, his voice small and uncertain. Dant pulled him into a fierce hug. You were amazing, kiddo. Absolutely amazing. But we're not out of the woods yet. This is just the beginning. As the Star Scrapper drifted away from the Zavorian cruiser, Dante knew that their actions today would have far-reaching consequences. They had challenged the Zavorian concept of genetic purity and hinted at abilities that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. But more importantly, they had taken the first step towards changing hearts and minds. It wasn't just about keeping Spark safe anymore. It was about fighting for a future where beings like him could be accepted and celebrated for their unique gifts. As they plotted a course deeper into uncharted space, still searching for the elusive nexus, Dant realized that their personal struggle had evolved into something much larger. They were now at the center of a philosophical and political storm that could reshape galactic society. The real challenge was just beginning, and the fate of countless worlds might hinge on the bond between a human ex-criminal and the extraordinary alien child he had come to love as his own. Triumph of humanity. The great hall of the Galactic Conclave buzzed with tension. Representatives from 100 different species filled the chamber, their varied forms creating a tapestry of alien life. At the center of it all stood Dante and Spark, now a young adult by Zavorian standards, his exoskeleton shimmering with patterns of light that seemed to shift and change with his emotions. 5 years had passed since their confrontation with Peacekeeper Shala. 5 years of running, hiding, and slowly building a network of allies across the stars. They had never found the mythical nexus, but in its place, they had created something perhaps even more powerful, a movement. High Counselor Zix of the Zavorian delegation rose, his ancient frame trembling slightly as he addressed the assembly. We stand at a crossroads, he intoned, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. Before us is a being that challenges everything we thought we knew about genetics, about potential, about the very nature of intelligence itself. Spark stepped forward, his compound eyes scanning the crowd. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong, amplified by the chamber's acoustics. I am not here to overthrow or to condemn, he began. I am here to offer a new perspective, a bridge between worlds and ideologies. Over the next hour, Spark demonstrated abilities that left even the most skeptical delegates awestruck. He interfaced seamlessly with the Conclave's advanced systems, solving complex equations and optimizing processes in ways that should have been impossible. But more than that, He showed an empathy and emotional intelligence that defied the cold, logical stereotype of his species. "My father," Spark said, gesturing to Dante, "taught me that true strength lies not in genetic purity or technological superiority, but in compassion, in the willingness to see value in those different from ourselves." Dante felt a lump form in his throat. Despite everything they had been through, despite the danger and hardship, he had never been prouder than in this moment. As Spark concluded his presentation, the chamber erupted into a cacophony of debate. Some delegates called for immediate acceptance and integration of beings like Spark into galactic society. Others warned of the dangers of genetic unpredictability. Amidst the chaos, a familiar figure approached Dante. Peacekeeper Kshala, her once imposing armor now softened by signs of wear and introspection. "You were right," she said softly, her antennae drooping slightly. "All those years ago, you were right about him. About everything." Dante nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It wasn't easy," he replied, "but nothing worth doing ever is." As the debate raged on, a consensus began to emerge. The Galactic Conclave would establish a new initiative, one dedicated to identifying and nurturing unique genetic variations across all species. Spark would be its first ambassador, a living bridge between worlds. In the days that followed, as news of the Conclave's decision spread across the galaxy, Dante found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. From a chance encounter on a grimy space station to the halls of galactic power, their story had become a testament to the power of compassion, determination, and the unbreakable bond between a father and son, regardless of species. Spark found Dante on the observation deck of the Conclave station, gazing out at the stars. "Papa," he said, his voice carrying a note of concern, "are you all right?" Dante turned, smiling at the being he had raised as his own. "Just thinking, kiddo, about how far we've come, about what comes next." Spark's exoskeleton pulsed with warm, comforting colors. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. You taught me that." As they stood there, the unlikely pair that had changed the course of galactic history, Dante felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had faced prejudice, danger, and seemingly insurmountable odds. But through it all, they had proven that the human capacity for love, acceptance, and perseverance could transcend the boundaries of species and reshape the very stars themselves. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities they could scarcely imagine. But Dante knew that as long as they held on to the bonds that had brought them this far, the bonds of family, forged not in blood, but in shared struggle and unwavering support, they could face whatever the universe had in store. As the first light of a new galactic dawn broke over the horizon, Dante put his arm around Spark's shoulders. Together, they looked out at the vast expanse of space, ready to write the next chapter in their extraordinary story. A story that would be told and retold across the cosmos for generations to come. In that moment, standing side by side with the alien child he had come to love as his own, Dante realized that they had achieved something truly remarkable. They had not only saved Spark and challenged the prejudices of an entire civilization, they had demonstrated the very best of what humanity could be when it embraced compassion, diversity, and the infinite potential of the unknown. As father and son, human and alien, they had become living proof that the greatest adventures, the most profound discoveries, and the truest forms of love often come from the most unexpected places. And in doing so, they had given hope to countless beings across the galaxy, showing that even in the vast, often cold expanse of space, the warmth of understanding and acceptance could flourish and change worlds. The end of their journey was just the beginning of a new era, one where the boundaries between species blurred, where difference was celebrated rather than feared, and where the legacy of an ex-criminal and an abandoned child would inspire generations to look to the stars not with trepidation, but with wonder and hope.